So hi, how are you guys doing? My name is Callie, and if any of you in the room know me, you probably know me by the name of Swoon, which is a tag name that I adopted, I guess, over 10 years ago when I started doing wheat paste out on the street illegally, and tag names seemed like a good idea. And then it just kind of stuck with me. To be honest, in person, I hate to be called it. I like to be called Callie. And I just realized recently that I think it's because Swoon for me is kind of an idea that has been generating in me for a lot of years. And I think the thing that I would like to try and do today is explain that. So I'll start from the beginning. I went to school here at Pratt. I studied painting. I was from a very small town. Hello. And when I got here, you know, I was really ready to kind of grow into this life as an artist, but very, very quickly I started to feel really suffocated by what seemed to me this sort of life that was laid out for me of like, I was gonna paint some pictures, they were gonna end up on a wall, you know, maybe that wall was in a gallery, maybe it was gonna be in a museum, but it seemed like this kind of very straightforward thing where the only people that were ever necessarily gonna appreciate what I was gonna do would be the kind of people who were very comfortable going into galleries or who had enough money and sort of spare time to go to museums. And so, you know, I was really, really, really hungry for context. I wanted to become part of something larger than myself. I wanted to embrace the world and become a part of the world. And like, looking back on it, I think that my response to that desire was like quite literal. Like I basically started making drawings and sort of gluing them to the world, to walls and things. So I had a series of drawings that I started. They're portraits of people in city and sort of looking at architecture and looking at the way that people interact with cities and stuff. And I thought that that project was going to go on for something like 2 months, but I'm still doing it like over 10 years later. So it was something that really started me on a path. And I think that the first thing that really happened was like, you know, I was a young woman, and I really had no sense of my ability to make any kind of change in the world. And then suddenly, in this very concrete way, I went outside, I put up a wheat paste, I walked by the next day, and there it was. And I had changed that street corner. And so just that very, very small thing of like, okay, it was a gray wall on the side of an abandoned bodega, and now it's a gray wall with a picture on it. And it's, you know, people can have a moment of connection with that. And it's this very, very tiny change. But nonetheless, for me to be able to see and read back that I could have an impact on things was really, really transformative. And I would say that it led me on a pretty long path that I'm still on. And the other thing that was really great about working in that way was that I was having hundreds of different interactions. And that was sort of what I was talking about wanting context. That once I started working in the city, I started to get all this different kind of feedback from the pieces that I was making. And one of those stories that has stuck with me for years, and it happened years ago, but it has remained really important to me, happened this time that I was walking down a block pretty near to my house, and I had been making these kind of tiny little views, and then drilling tiny little holes in construction fences and putting them in there. And so I was like peeking at one of them to see like how is it holding up. And this woman stopped me and she was like, hey, do you know anything about that? And I was like, well, yeah, I made that. And she said, oh, cool, I want to tell you the story. She said, you know, there's a guy who lives on this block. He's a little bit mentally handicapped, and he hangs out here. It's kind of his block. Like, he's the greeter. He talks to everyone. And she said that he found that, and that kind of very quickly became his thing, and he started to call it The Secret. And she said, and every time somebody would come by, he'd be like, hey, do you want to see The Secret? And he would bring them over and show them this. And she said that it kind of created this, like, slightly magical space between her and the neighbors on the block, that they all kind of shared this secret. And I like just hugged this stranger on the street. I was like, oh my God, thank you for telling me that. You know, it was an amazing thing to me that feeling that by putting a little kind of very tiny change in an environment, you can change all of those associations that people have and sort of create an opportunity for connection among people. And also, you know, what the guy, I forgot his name, sorry, right before, was saying about the genesis of possible worlds. I thought that that was a really nice phrase. And when I think about that, and when I think about, you know, you make a small change and that creates the feeling that maybe there's like a slightly different world kind of existing like right where we are, and you just have to have a little bit of a perceptual shift in order to see it. That was like kind of the hope that I took away from that story. And I would say that kind of desire, that kind of impulse was sort of born in the next project that I was to sort of dedicate my life to, which was a series of rafts that I spent about 4 years making. This one is called the Miss Rockaway Armada, and we were a collective of about 30 people, and we built these rafts, and we went down the Mississippi River. And then this one is the Swimming Cities of Switchback Sea, which was a series of a flotilla that I designed that came down the Hudson River towards New York City, sort of performing along the way. And then the Swimming Cities of Serenissima, let me click that next one, with which we actually were able to traverse the Adriatic Sea, terrifyingly enough, and arrive in Venice, which was incredibly magical. And the really cool thing about arriving on a rig like this is people freak out. And they're like, what are you? I used to love being like, a boat. But anyway, I found like through years of working in this way that like if you can make something that people are not expecting to see, and if you can roll up with it in a place that people are not expecting to find it in a way that just totally blows people's expectations, it's like this little opening happens, you know? In that moment of surprise and in that little kind of moment of cognitive dissonance, you're able to actually get a reaction from people which is much different than any other response I've ever had to a work that I created. It's almost like you create a little opening into this childlike part of themselves. You know, it's like that part that's usually kind of ground down by the relentless, grueling details of every day. And if you can kind of break that open, then there's suddenly this feeling of a lot more possibility. And that the world is kind of like stranger and a little bit more, there's just a lot more going on than maybe you imagined 5 minutes ago. And you know, for me, I think about that a lot, and I feel like that kind of a space, like the place where you believe in kind of an infinity of possibilities, is the place within ourselves with which we are able to make positive change. Like that's kind of like, that for me is what gives me that kind of strength. And I feel like that's the kind of place that, from which you're able to, you know, even though we've seen like the 1000th brutal kind of ending, you're able to still say, no, I don't accept this as an inevitable outcome. I'm going to reimagine and regroup and try to make a new situation and a new path through these situations. And so for me, I felt like, you know, being on these boats for years and constantly being in contact with that sense of wonder from people, it really like strengthened my feeling of like a lot of possibility. Thank you. Of like just having a sense of kind of heightened possibilities. And I think that it also really strengthened my own ability to kind of act from that place, you know, to sort of defy doubt and believe in sort of unimaginable things. And let me see, what's next? So I think that, you know, after all those years of working in that way, I was kind of ready to not be working on the water anymore, but I wasn't really sure what was next, and I definitely had that kind of sense of possibility kind of around me. And I was in the woods in kind of a hold-up self-study architecture class with my boyfriend and fellow artist, Ben Wolf, and we heard the news of the earthquake in Haiti. And I think that, you know, like everyone else, we were totally, totally shaken by that news, and we immediately started to ask ourselves, what can we do to help? And you know, it was pretty apparent that we weren't going to be first responders. We're not translators. We're not medics. And of course, you know, there was a little bit of that question of like, we're artists. Like, what can we do? Is there anything that we can do? Does it even make any sense? You know, and so we started sort of researching and thinking about what were some of the responses that other architects, artists, activists, community organizers had to disaster. And we found the work of an Iranian-born architect named Nader Khalili. And he's somebody that had spent the last 20 years of his life, he started an organization called Cal Earth, and he dedicated himself to the problem of the humanitarian housing, or of the housing crisis kind of worldwide. And what he spent his life trying to do was to develop a system which was easily replicatable and which could make houses that were extremely resistant to earthquakes and tornadoes, and which were built relatively cheaply with the materials that people had on hand. And so we talked about it a bit, and we decided that sort of combining this sound and proven kind of architectural system with our own, you know, ingenuity and creativity, and also trying to sort of draw upon and think about the strength of our creative community. Actually, Christina Ray, who's here right now, she helped us do fundraisers, and so it was this thing of saying, who are we as artists, and what is the thing that we can bring to this situation? And we wanted to really pull together a very specific response that was about the strength of our community. And so we decided to, you know, take this idea and to see if there was a place in Haiti that this would make sense. And so we traveled to a village. We traveled around a little bit, sort of looking for the place that this would work and making sure that this architectural style would make sense in Haiti. And we found a village called Begonis, which is outside of Léogâne. And it's a village of farmers and mango growers and stone carvers. And they were really excited to work with us. And so we learned this architectural style, and then we shared it. And we built a community center over the period of 6 weeks. And we engaged a lot of artisans and local craftspeople. And I actually just recently got the really awesome news that through Creative Time, we just received a Rockefeller Foundation grant to go back in December. And yay, see this? See this woman, her name is Monique, and she came to us on hiring day and she said, I'm pregnant and I don't have anyone to take care of me and I can't really do any heavy lifting, but if you could hire me, that would be great. So we had her help us serve lunch, and then she had her baby in the middle of the project. And so now my hope is that when we go back in December, we can build her a house. And it's really exciting, and it's very different than anything I've ever been able to do before. And I guess, the thing I started saying was that, me like 10 years ago in Brooklyn, putting up an illegal wheat paste really did sort of lead me on this path, which ended, or not ended, but which is continuing here with this kinds of projects in Haiti and these kinds of much more unlikely projects. And I feel like that all of the experiences that I have had over this, over the years, and all of the sort of improbability that has come to be, has really sort of gave me a certain kind of a faith that you could make unlikely things happen. Because when we started to think about this project, a lot of people said, like, you're just a couple of artists, like, what are you thinking? You're not a big NGO, you're not experienced in dealing with disaster, why don't you leave it to the big groups, like they're having a hard time as it is. And I just really had the gut feeling that what we had, which was being a very small and focused group that wanted to, on a very person-to-person scale, sort of lend our energy and our help, could be kind of our unique strength, and it was. And so I guess I just want to sort of bring it back around to what I started to say about explaining my name, my quote-unquote name, which is Swoon. This kind of, I think that for me, it's become not quite a name, but more like a code word for the kind of like the trickster's belief in miracles, which is to say that, like, if you kind of break a rule over here and move a boundary over there and have like a moment of creative play and create something of beauty, that through all of those actions and combined with a lot of dedication, you can start to create little cracks in the kind of facade of impossibility and inevitability that I think overlays a lot of our lives and that a lot of us battle. And that, through those cracks, little kinds of possibilities start to come up, and they ask to be born, and then they're born, and they start sort of unifying and linking with each other, and that's a really powerful force. And that's the force that I would say I live my life by. So thanks for letting me share it with you guys.